Well, welcome to the Jesus Network podcast. I'll be your host,
Wow.
Myles.
We
And
are
this
your
is my lovely wife.
D. We're the MacCloskeys. And we're just so excited because we have just loved being able to share our hearts with people and friends and family in our church. We're the pastors of the Freedom House
Best church in the
in
world.
Texas. And we're just excited to have a space to do this with a podcast and be able to reach just different people of all walks of life and where they're at with the Lord and really talk about the things that what would Jesus be talking
Yeah.
about in
Yeah.
this day and what is the church not talking about and what are some topics that need to come to the forefront and need to be discussed.
Yep.
So that's why we're here and that's what we're doing.
Yep. We have watched over the years people who have just been in church and we've kind of just lived up to this standard of American Christianity and what that looks like. And we want to start posing some thoughts and asking some questions about what we have not been asking ourselves about. And that is, do we actually look like the believers in the Bible? Does the church look like the church in the Bible? If you were to have never stepped foot into a church, but you read the Bible, would you walk into a church and say, this does not look anything like I thought it was going to look like? Or would you say, wow, this one looks just like the church at Corinth or the Acts church or Romans or whatever? And we started putting out some thoughts and questions and to see what people thought needed to be talked about. And we got some feedback.
So what's our first question for this episode?
Our first question,
It's a good one.
and many people would hear this and be like, I don't even know why that question's being worth asked, but we need to ask it. And the question is, are you a Christian or are you a follower of Jesus?
And there is a difference.
There's a huge difference. And I believe with all my heart that one of them is a label that we give ourselves, and another one is a lifestyle that you cannot deny, and it brings glory to God in everything that we do. So let's kind of talk about that question. I believe that some people listening are actually going to hear that question and they'll be like, wait, a Christian's a follower of Jesus, so I'm both. And I get it, y'all. A Christian being a follower of Jesus, I understand. But a lot of times we have just said, yes, I'm a Christian, but really, would you be willing to lay down your life for Jesus? And if you say yes, how are you doing that on a regular basis?
Right.
And I think that's something that we don't take note of, or we don't do like a spiritual health check on our lives regularly enough to know, am I actually just one that puts the label of Christian, meaning I go to church, sometimes once a week, sometimes other things get in the way, and I go every other week. And we actually sum up our relationship with Jesus into our church attendance.
Would you say in this day and age, more people, would you classify them more as just the quote unquote Christians rather than true disciples and followers of Jesus?
Jesus talked about it before even today, and he said, many are called, few are chosen. He knew what was coming. He knew what was happening there. I think people only see Jesus with 12 disciples and like, oh, he had 12 disciples, 12 hardcore followers of Jesus, straight up left their dad on the boat
Right.
with the nets, left their tax booth, left their career, everything they had built up, all this stuff. And he didn't just have 12. It's not like he only invited 12 to follow him.
Right.
You go through and he asks many, hey, would you come follow me? Well, guess what? The rich young ruler was not willing to give up his money because he valued money more than Jesus.
So how do you see that though in today's society with people? Because I think what happens is we read the Bible and we love to see the disciples that we connect with and that I would be like John or I would be like, but we say that or we think that or we even admire what they did.
Yeah.
But it's so rare, I feel like, to live a life like that nowadays.
Yeah.
And we read the Bible and we want the Bible to be alive and relevant, but would you actually leave your job? Would you actually lay down an inheritance of what your father worked for his whole life to hand to you? Would you actually walk away from a dream that you thought maybe was from the Lord, but is actually your own desire, and really give it all away and lay it all down and follow Jesus? Or do you just go to church on Sunday morning and sometimes,
Yeah.
and that's enough. And that's a
Yeah.
whole other thing we could talk about, how the average Christian goes once every 6 weeks, but,
Mm-hmm.
and going to church does not make you a Christian. So then you have that side of people where they're just like, well, I have a relationship with Jesus, but the church has hurt me and I don't want to be a part of that. And that's unhealthy.
Yeah.
And they've abused me and all the things. So now it's like Christianity has gotten so just messy and enmeshed with not biblical life of what Jesus called us to and what the disciples modeled for us.
Yeah.
And so it's like we read it in the Bible, we say we believe it, but we don't actually apply it today. We don't actually follow through with it now.
Yeah. I think the greatest stumbling block that we have in our lives is that we would say with all of our heart, we'd be like, I would lay everything down for Jesus.
Right.
If he asked me.
Right.
And then they never pursue the opportunity. Like they never pursue the prayer of, God, what is it that I can lay down for you today? They're not looking for it. They're waiting for God to like speak through the clouds to go and do something when he already came to the earth and died on a cross and then said, go therefore make disciples of all nations. And I think this is the difference between disciple and Christian. A Christian is like, I'm welcomed into the family. But the disciple comes into the family and says, this is my house. How can I take care of it? There's also those outside of the house that don't even know what's going on inside the house. How can I go reach them? The disciple is the one who has the heart of the Father. Christians want to hear what the Father's heart is for them. Disciples are the ones who say, the Father's heart's for the lost. I'm going to go and reach the lost. If there is not a stirring in your heart to go and preach the gospel, you're waiting for God to give you the calling of an evangelist when he's already called all of us into making disciples. And I think that is the part that we struggle with, is that honestly, there is an error of the church, and that is that we have poorly modeled what it looks like to make disciples. We have modeled how to bring people to church.
Yeah.
We've modeled how to invite people on a Sunday morning, and we've actually turned people away from evangelism. We've turned people away from shepherding. We've turned people away from prophecy, and we've turned them into marketing for a church to grow bigger.
We've enabled them too.
Yes.
We've said, well done, you brought a friend to church. And that's almost like a crutch or a scapegoat. And is it good to bring people to church? Absolutely. But if that's all that you're doing, and if your friends don't know that you're a believer or know how much you love the Lord or see it in you or see something different, but just for us to say like, that's enough as a Christian. And that's like, I feel like even extreme, like saying, oh, they invite a lot of people to church. They like really love the Lord. It's like, maybe they do, but that's not that's not the cap. That's not like the most you can do as a disciple or as a Christian, but we've watered down so many things of being a real follower of Jesus. And there are times that we have even asked ourselves, like, we don't want to sit there and point fingers and be like, would they, but we even ask ourselves, if this was back in the Bible and Jesus was on the earth, like during his 33 years, would we have followed him? Would we have like laid it all down and really truly did it? Or would we have been like the ones that are like, oh, but wait, I gotta go sell my land and I gotta go bury my dad and I gotta go, do all those things.
Everybody's got an excuse.
Right. And I feel like that's so common now, where it's like, what are you waiting for? What is needed for you to take that step? And whether it's fear or whether it's finances, like super logical things, or whether it doesn't make sense in our culture, or whatever it is, it's kind of like you have to get to the place of like, is this the heart of the Father? And are you being obedient to what he's calling you to do? Because how many people have we talked to that are like, I know the Lord's calling me, I just got to pray. I'm just waiting. And it's like, you are waiting and you will be waiting forever. And you will miss the Lord. If you don't get up and follow him, take up your cross and actually follow after him,
I actually feel so bad for the people that you read stories in the Bible and you read about the Pharisees and you're always like, these rotten jokers, you know what I mean? Like, they missed the Lord. They completely missed him. And then they never want to associate themselves with it. Like, we would love, like you said, like, we pick which disciple we feel like we would connect with, but we never read the stories about the Pharisees and say,
that's me.
Sometimes I'm just like them. The other side too is we read the story of the prodigal son, and everybody loves the story of the prodigal son coming back to the father, obviously living a full life of sin and hookers and spending all of his dad's money, basically saying, you're dead to me, give me your inheritance, all this stuff. And then he comes back, and the father, clothes him, puts a ring on his finger, kills the fattened calf, throws a party, all this stuff. And we love that part of the story so much that we forget the next part, where the older brother comes to the father. And not even that, the father comes out of the party to go get him. I love the father. I love that Jesus, he does, like, nobody is so far gone or so prideful that God doesn't go and attempt at least one more time.
Yeah.
And he does it with the older son, and the older son's like, you never did this for me. You never killed a fattened calf for me and threw a party with my friends so that we could rejoice. And the father says, I've always been with you. You've always had me. He was dead, and now he's alive. And I think of the older son like so many people who still are around God. They're around his presence. They're around his people. They're in the church. They show up for church services. And all the while, the older son had to have seen his dad, because his dad had been watching this, watching for the younger son, for the prodigal son to return home. He saw him when he was far off. The older son had to know that the father's heart was for this lost son to come home. And the older son did nothing about it.
Yeah.
He stayed with the father. Good for you, buddy.
Right.
You knew the father's heart was torn for this lost soul,
Right.
and you didn't go out looking for him. You didn't even try. So here's the difference of a disciple and a Christian. Who actually knows the father's heart and goes and does something about it? The Christian is waiting for a calling. The disciple says, Jesus already called me. I'm following him wherever he tells me to go daily. And it's not waiting for someone to come and say, hey, go and make disciples. It's reading the word and seeing that he's already said it.
Yeah.
I think we get caught up in this. Let me go get my prayer closet and let me see what the Lord has to say. And yes, the Lord will speak what is to come to us. He will reveal, he will speak words of prophecy to us, all of this stuff. But there's already so much that's written.
Yeah.
So I think we just need to figure out how we can help people recognize daily living. How can I live as a disciple of Jesus? How can I follow Jesus every single day?
Yeah.
And nobody likes preaching on the harsh things that Jesus would do, but he didn't just say, hey, like, I'll pay money, a full salary, a full-time ministry job to come and follow me. He didn't do that. He said, leave everything, right? He says even in Luke chapter 15, where's it at? 14. He says, any one of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple. He was talking about the story of the king who's got 10,000 warriors, and he's about to go in a war against somebody that has 20,000. And he's like, look, while that king is still a far way off, you better figure out if you have the ability to take him out. And if not, while he's still off, send a peace treaty and say, hey, we don't want to go in this battle because I know I'm going to lose. And right after that, he says, if you don't renounce everything you have, you cannot be my disciple. He's saying you take everything in your life and you weigh it out, and then you look at what it looks like to follow me, and you have to decide before you follow me, am I worth everything you have? And that's what it takes.
Right.
And my fear is that people have invited Jesus in to this, like, to be a side of their lives, a part of their lives. Like, hey, I need you to come help me pursue my American dream.
Right.
Where Jesus is saying, if you're not willing to give up the American dream, you can't even be my disciple.
What did you say the other day about having like a pocket, like we treat him
Pocket
like a pocket Jesus? Like, oh, he's convenient. Let me take him out. Oh, I need him. Let me pray. Oh, my friend, and it's just like we find these moments where he fits into our lives instead of giving him our whole life.
Yeah.
And that's not what he called us to do. And it makes me think about, we're talking about like laying down everything and following him. And I grew up in a very, a wonderful church. I met the Lord there. I was filled with the Holy Spirit there. I grew up there. But there was a lot of legalism, very legalistic, very like, this is what you do. So I see that even now. I've been talking with people and discipling people, and they're stuck in this like, well, I'm a Christian, but I don't want to just be a Christian. I want to be a disciple. But they're formulating that to behavior modification.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I'm a disciple, then I can't do this and I can't do that and I have to do this and I can't watch this and I can't be friends with that person. I can't and it becomes this rules and regulations.
Yeah.
Rather than falling in love with Jesus, falling in love, getting to the heart of the Father, loving righteousness, loving purity. Like I think even about, growing up in the church, like the purity culture was huge, which again is great. And we should be pure before we get married and all that. Like it's very biblical. What we're saying is like the path we want to take, but it turned into like, do not have sex before you're married. And everyone's like, okay. And then it was just like, but why? Just because that's the rule? Well, what happens? We want to rebel against rules. We want to figure things out for ourselves. Rather than saying like, rather than showing us this is how the Lord created you. This is why you're so special and unique and precious. This is why you should live a life of purity, not even just for marriage, just in pursuing the Lord, and teaching us like falling in love with the Lord and how special that is. And when you love him, you'll obey him. And you don't obey him because it's rigid and it's struck into your soul and heart and mind and all the things. It's like, I don't want to go against what he wants for my life because I love him and I know the love that he has for me is going to bring me a life well far beyond what I could even have asked for or prayed for anyway, because he loves me so much. And so it's just like getting away from this, like, okay, this is what we have to be and this is how we have to live. Like, yes, it's a sacrifice, and yes, you lay down your life, and yes, you give it all away, and yes, you live in faith and all of that. But you do it out of this response of love. And it doesn't even, I hate even being like, oh, it's hard being a Christian. Like,
no, it's harder not being a Christian.
I don't think it is. Yeah.
It's harder not knowing Jesus. It's hard not having him. Here's the beauty of when you leave everything behind for Jesus is that when you let go of everything that you have and Jesus becomes everything that you have, you no longer need everything you used to have. My dad, he used to always say it. He's like, when I got saved, my want-tos changed.
Yeah.
He's like, I no longer wanted to do the things that I used to want to do. Nobody is coming to me on a daily basis and saying, hey, don't cheat on your wife. Right. Hey, don't beat your wife. Hey, don't belittle your wife. They don't have to if I'm in love with you. Because why would I want to do any of those things? Nobody has to tell me I have this chore list now of being married because I'm in love with my wife.
Right, exactly.
So if you look at following Jesus as a chore list, I would just ask, are you in love with Jesus?
Yeah.
Because if you're in love with him, it's not a chore to love him.
Exactly. So do you feel like is that the good like checklist for people to go through? Like, okay, let me check my heart. Search my heart, oh Lord, see if there's any wicked way within me. Is that a good little checklist to see, okay, am I just a Christian? Or can I say I am a true follower of Christ? Like, what are like, even just an applicable, like 2 or 3 things, like, okay, if I'm doing this or whatever, to make sure that they're following the Lord.
I think there's many things that you could figure out. Obviously, intimacy with the Lord is huge. And yes, people need to be getting in their prayer closets and having a devoted space with the Lord because you love him and you want to be with him. But when you hear from the Lord, you have to be willing to go and do the word. That's why I think Christians hear the word, disciples do the word. James talked about it. He said, don't be hearers of the word only, but also be doers. Because if you just hear it and don't do it, you're deceiving yourself. And I think that's a place that you need to recognize. How many times have I heard the scriptures and heard the voice of God speak to me to go do something, and I simply heard it, I did not do it. That's a checklist item, I think, for you to check, just to look into your own heart and see, have I even followed what the Lord has told me to do in the word and in my prayer closet? And even daily, how are you serving the Lord? Like, Jesus came here and he's like, I came not to be served, but to serve. And he showed us the example, and he taught the disciples when he washed their feet. He's like, you don't understand it now, but you will soon. I'm doing this as an example for you. Love one another. How are you serving people to point them back to Jesus? Because if you just go to your job and say, I don't cuss and I don't drink that much, your life with the Lord is about what you're not doing rather than what you are doing. Yeah. How are you? Did I serve you today, Lord? One of the things I cried out when I was younger and didn't even know what I was saying, And it marked me for all of my days. Was I just cried this out to the Lord, and I've never forgotten. It's an honor to serve you, Lord. It's an honor to serve you, Lord. It's not a chore. It's not something that I have to do. It's truly my honor for the Lord to say, hey, Myles, can you go and talk to that person and tell them that I love them?
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like a chore to do it. It feels like an honorable act, a good work that I got to do to serve God and point somebody back to the Father's heart.
We should feel honored that he would choose us and that he trusts us to do that. And we allow fear to come in, or we allow not wanting to be rejected to come in, and we allow our own pride to come in and to say like, well, I don't want to, what if I'm wrong? What if they were, and it's like, God chose you to do something and you're telling him no. Like how dishonoring is that? You know what I mean? So it really is. It's just shifting that mindset of like, look at the Lord differently and how he's created us and how he loves us. And I feel like it makes it easy to just want to follow him with everything.
You'll make every excuse on the earth as to why not do it.
Right.
But the second you get to heaven, you'll look back and say, I could have done so much more. You know, there's like this, one of the greatest fears I have for people is, especially for Christians or those who just have the label of Christian on their lives, is that there will come a day that you are waiting in line and you see Jesus and you see the gates to heaven and you're ready to go enter, and you're like, man, I went to church all the time, you know, Sundays, I read my Bible sometimes, I memorized a couple scriptures here and there. And you're nearing the front of the line and you're so ready to hear Jesus tell you those magical words, those beautiful words, well done, good and faithful servant. Yet they don't hear that. They hear, depart from me, I never knew you. And my greatest fear is for the ones who are expecting to hear the good phrase, but they're actually going to receive the other. And a lot of people would say, no, that won't happen to me. But even Jesus, he talks about it. He says, many will come to me saying, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? Did we not cast out demons in your name? Hey, Christians, have you ever cast out a demon? Have you ever prophesied in his name? Have you done these things? These people are doing these good works and still they don't get to go in. Some of us haven't even done that, and we don't know the Lord and don't love the Lord. So I think a true disciple of the Lord would be willing to search their heart and say, God, search my heart. Go read Psalm 139 all the way through. Search my heart. You know me. Find if there's any grievous way in me, any evil way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Yeah. You pray that prayer every single day, and you actually start to do what God has spoken to you to do. I would say you are a disciple. And I would say if you're not doing those things and you go to church and call yourself as a Christian, I would say that you're deceived. And you have to wake up. You have to wake up. That's my call to action for every believer.
Amen.
Amen.